Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Friday night preview show on whichever channel this happens to find you. It's FA Cup weekend, so we've shuffled our pack a little bit, but like Norwich City tomorrow, we're just as strong. Dave Freezer joining us for this one. Get all your comments, all your questions in. We'll be with you for about half an hour, 45 minutes or so. Anything you want to know, Norwich City related, get it in, and we'll discuss it. Dave, let's start off with kicking off with the FA Cup. In terms of it as a competition, obviously it's very different this year. Some would say it's probably been different for many a year compared to perhaps the event that it used to be. For you personally, how special is this competition still?
Oh, I don't know. I personally, in my lifetime, I've never really felt the FA Cup's that special, because you've grown up in Norwich City circles, haven't you? So I'm a little bit too young for the FA Cup semi-finals. The one in '92, I was 5 or 6 or something, so I don't remember them. But yeah, so that's always felt like a historic thing to me. It's just an enjoyment, the same as the League Cup for me. If it doesn't go well, there's not really much in the way of devastation, because where Norwich City are as a club, the important thing is forever trying to chase Premier League stability, isn't it? Because that's the only way they're ever going to be able to build towards being a force. But that's a much bigger conversation for another day. So yeah, I enjoyed the FA Cup. I enjoyed the Coventry game, and particularly this season, because so many of the Norwich games have been tight and decided by one goal. That for them, particularly that Coventry game, when they went 2-0 up in 7 minutes, it just felt bizarre, didn't it? That like we were just enjoying a Norwich game where they were controlling it and there was very little sort of pressure on it. So I'm kind of looking forward to it again tomorrow. We can all just, whether you're watching along at home or lucky enough to be there, you can just sort of take it all in and not worry about if it goes wrong.
And it serves as a great opportunity, doesn't it, to give some of those players on the edge, some that are on the comeback trail as well, just a little bit of an opportunity. I remember after the Coventry game, we saw a few players kind of state their claim, didn't they, for the Championship team. Kenny McLean was very good that day, although he sort of played in it a couple of times before that. So I'm thinking players like Kieran Dow, it's a perfect opportunity to try and get in that Championship team.
Yeah, I think the one problem with it is that the majority of those players are all in a similar position. So I can't see him putting, for instance, Paqueta, Hernandez and Dowell all in as the attacking midfield, because that just feels like too many changes from what we've seen with Daniel Farke in the past. But those three in particular, yeah, they really need minutes. Defence, there's not really any options to change things. He's talked about that Tim Krul is going to start already, isn't he? So I don't think we're going to see too much. Lucas Rupp is probably the biggest sort of point of interest in terms of a player who could really mix it now with McLean having his positive COVID test, which I'm sure we'll come on to. But I think it's been not forgotten about, but in the background a little bit, that Onel Hernandez was a big part of Norwich winning the title 2 years ago. Was it 8 goals and 9 assists or something like that in the Championship? That's really, really good. And if he could come in and have a big impact during the second half of the season, the same for Dowell and Paqueta, who is now a Poland international, let's not forget, tomorrow could have some real meaningful effect on the rest of the season.
It was really interesting to see Onel Hernandez come on as a striker in midweek. I wonder if that's something he's toying with. Maybe if Jordan Hugill does need to be withdrawn a bit early, because he's played a lot of football, hasn't he, in the last week compared to what he's played over the full season. Let's kick off with that Kenny McLean news then. A positive COVID test for him. He's the only Norwich player that has tested positive in the lead up. Xavi Quintea still in isolation. All the staff members that tested positive, Daniel Farke said today, are back at work. Barley Mumba training again. Obviously, Tim Krul has returned, and as Dave said there, we'll start tomorrow. So all good news on that front. But for Kenny McLean, it feels more like a blow for Norwich City as a whole because of his performances and how well he's been playing in recent weeks. I think certainly I feel like he's in the best form of his Norwich City career at the moment.
Yeah, fortunately, he tweeted, doesn't he, and said, I've only got minor symptoms, so he's at the moment not sort of feeling it too badly. But he's been exceptional this month so far. I think he would definitely be on the shortlist for the club's player of the month. He'll be in contention for winning that. Barnsley, it was that pass for the brilliant Buendia goal, wasn't it? And he scored against Coventry in the FA Cup, and he's been really good. He's just, I'm sure that Scotland sort of carrot on the stick for him of potentially playing England at Wembley in the Euros this summer has been a big motivator for him. It must be just to play in a tournament for Scotland must be a big motivator for him. So fortunately, it's just going to be 10 days of isolation like it has with the other guys, and hopefully won't have any further impact than that. But it disrupts his rhythm, and hopefully he'll be able to come back and perform at the levels that he has been in recent weeks, because he's been really important, and I think he's been in the best form of his Norwich career. I know he did do well during the second half of the title-winning season alongside Tribal as the central midfield pairing, but I think he's playing better than that at the moment. I feel like he's really sort of maybe hitting his peak of his career, and really looks comfortable alongside Skip, who gives him that little bit more freedom to roam, doesn't he? So Ida's back from his COVID test as well, isolation as well, isn't he? Kintyre will be at the start of next week to get back into training. But I think in the wider context as well, I mean, hopefully, touch wood, we're going to start seeing this in the wider society as well in terms of the numbers dropping. But the EFL a couple of weeks ago brought in that all clubs now need to be testing twice a week, don't they? Which was in association with the PFA. And that seems to have got a handle on it, because we saw the numbers come out this week, and it was less than 0.7% of the, I think it's 4,500 tests across the 72 EFL clubs. And so that number has quickly been sort of brought into control. And Norwich gives us an example of that, doesn't it? If you look at the amount of outbreak they had just a couple of weeks ago, that's now come down dramatically, isn't it? So hopefully, beyond Norwich, football has got a better grip of it now, and is at least in the professional game going to be able to see out this season.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems to have ridden that sort of storm over the last few weeks where we were talking about suspensions and whatnot. So hopefully proof that they can come through this period is proof that we can crack on with the season as well. Beyond the COVID guys coming back, or in McLean's case, missing out, Timu Pukki misses this game as we knew he would with a side strain. Christoph Zumman isn't going to make it because of that hip issue. And then the big one really, I suppose, is Todd Cantwell, isn't it? And that back issue / hamstring issue. Daniel Farker did say it would only be a matter of days, not weeks. And I think if you were to select a game for him to miss in the recent weeks, it would be this FA Cup game. But a blow considering how much confidence, how much enjoyment even he looks like he's playing with on the pitch at the moment.
Yeah, he would definitely be one you'd be worried about if he wasn't there against Borough next week. But Daniel did certainly make encouraging noises along those lines, didn't he? But Todd's been in really good form recently. It feels like he has reached that next gear and is maturing and showing that he has developed his game. He is still a young guy, isn't he? Still only 22, and he has had a very eventful. It's only 3 years. He tweeted, didn't he, on Sunday? Was it? It was 3 years since his debut at Stamford Bridge. And you think what he's packed into 3 years, promotion with Fortuna Sittard, promotion with Norwich, relegation, becoming an England under-21 international. He's sort of one of the faces of Puma. His profile just skyrocketed, didn't it? And he's had to learn how to deal with a totally different pressure, and it's not always gone smoothly for him. But in the last few weeks, we've really seen him move to a different standard. And I felt on Wednesday that was the first time that I really felt, with watching Buendia and Cantwell, we can now start to think that they are probably Premier League players in the Championship. They've recovered their confidence, recovered their poise. And I think whether Norwich are in the Premier League or not next season, those two probably will be. But hopefully Norwich will be as well, the way things are going.
Yeah, absolutely. I noticed the Buendia rumours have taken on a new line, which is focused on the summer now, which is equally as frustrating. It feels like we might have to deal with that for the rest of the season. But Daniel Farker did say on, when was it, Tuesday, didn't he, that he would 99% be a Norwich player by the end of January. I think Arsenal are linked with Martin Odegaard as well, aren't they, from Real Madrid? So on a loan to the end of the season. So
I think that's the issue, isn't it, with Buendia, is that if we're talking about Arsenal's and we're talking about Valencia and we're talking about players of that clubs of that standard, if one of those bigger clubs comes in with this, big money, then Buendia has served Norwich well. He's given them 3 seasons, and it's kind of going to be difficult for him to say no, because he's 24 now. He if he wants to be a Champions League player, he wants to play at the top level of the game, wants to get in the Argentina squad, he probably isn't going to do that with Norwich, is he? He's very unlikely to do it at Norwich, and he's going to need to make that step. So, if those kind of leads continue, then yeah, we're going to be talking about Buendia a lot more in the months to come.
Would you play him tomorrow? He's obviously had this issue with the flu symptoms, hasn't he? Before Cardiff, obviously tested negative for COVID. Maybe he's been a little bit, maybe dipped a little bit from the high standard of his performances beforehand. Obviously, Cantwell's raised his game, so it's kind of balanced out a little bit. Would you play him tomorrow? Would you risk it, or do you think you'd save him for next week?
I thought he looked more fatigued at Cardiff than he did. I thought he looked good again on Wednesday. So I think he probably will play, just because, as I said at the top, I can't see him bringing in Paqueta, Dow, and Hernandez and making those three changes behind Hugill. I think that's going to be a bit too much. So I personally, I think he'll go with Paqueta, Vrancic, and Buendia, and then sort of on the hour look to get Dowell and Hernandez on, because they both need to get a decent chunk of minutes tomorrow. So presuming that Rupp starts alongside Skip or Tetty in midfield, I would then, look to get Rupp an hour, then drop Mario back into midfield alongside whoever that is, and get Dowell and Hernandez in there, and get Buendia on the bench. So that, I think that Daniel's going to go pretty strong, and he suggested that he has, isn't he? A, because he wants to get through. B, because the club definitely want to progress in the FA Cup. Financially, as much as anything, it can just help fill a little bit of that void created by COVID. If they can progress, a home tie against Chelsea, even without fans, is going to bring in a decent chunk of unbudgeted money. I'm talking off the top of my head, but I guess sort of $250,000, something like that, potentially. That's not money to be sniffed at, is it? So aside from that, what we saw with the Coventry game in the last round is that Daniel afterwards, after he'd made a reasonably strong team, or a stronger squad maybe than we expected, I know we made some changes, we still saw Aarons and Skip and Hanley and Pookie all play, Buendia all came off the bench, didn't they? But because they didn't have a midweek game after that, Daniel said after the match, well, there isn't a game this week in midweek, so I don't feel like I need to rest the players. And that's the same next week, isn't it? So I think that Daniel will go as strong as he feels he needs to get through, because, Barnsley, for all the praise we sort of gave them in Norwich circles after that game at the start of the year, their form has tailed off quite a bit.
Yeah, it has. I think they've not won any of their last 3 games, have they? Although the Barnsley fan we had on Terrace Talk this afternoon said they were particularly good at Watford, maybe just tailed off a little bit. I just wonder if the intensity of what Ishmael's asking them to do is maybe taking its toll a little bit. You referenced Daniel Farke going strong for the Cup. He certainly did that against Coventry. We tend to see it with German managers as well, don't we? Here he is at this afternoon's press conference talking about his respect for the competition and how he has to get the balance right tomorrow.
Yes, you know how much I really value the club and the cup competitions, of course, we want to be as successful as possible. Also in the FA Cup, it's the oldest competition in the whole cup competition in the whole world, and for that, lots of value, and we want to be as successful as possible, and also we want to go into the next round. We are of course aware that it's a bit special season. We have many games, and we won't take any risk. And it's more or less a third game within 7 days. It's of course quite normal that we will rotate a little bit. I think we need to find a good balance between taking a risk and to rotate a bit, but also to bring the best possible and really strong starting lineup on the pitch in order to go through to the next round. And this is more like the balance we have to find. But one thing is for sure, we want to win this game and want to go into the next round.
There you go. That's Daniel Farke speaking at his press conference this afternoon. Certainly interesting on how he's going to approach it. There are probably, as you just mapped out there, Dave, several different combinations that he can go with. Barley Mumba back, as we mentioned. Lucas Rook back, been training since Tuesday. Tim Krul, he did confirm today, barring anything happening overnight, would start and make his 100th appearance for the club. A magnificent achievement for someone who over the last 3 years, it feels like, has gone on a wave of improvement, maybe from where he started off, hadn't played football in a little while, and maybe was seen to be a little bit rusty.
Oh, he wasn't he? When he first arrived, I don't think there's any doubt about that, really, after what he'd been through with his knee injury and the way it had knocked his career off course. But, when Norwich signed Tim Krul, I think a lot of people forgot just how highly rated he was in the earlier stages of his career, when he was number 1 at Newcastle and, Holland International and things like that. He was really linked with a lot of big clubs, wasn't he? Inter Milan and Man United and all sorts. So he's ended up being a brilliant signing. As much as Pukki was a brilliant free transfer, so was Tim Krul, because he's such an influential figure, isn't he? He is a leader at the back and has made a massive difference. And in that title-winning season, you could literally just see his progress steadily getting better and better, couldn't it? And the passing out for the back and things like that improving. And a story that I've told you before, but the AGM in 2018, most people will probably remember Stuart Webber came out and really stood up for Tim. And there was that line, wasn't there, along the lines of I wanted to punch 10,000 people in the face or something like that, or 1,000 people in the face or something like that, wasn't there? You know, he was just making a big, bold statement to make a point. He didn't mean it literally. Because of the moaning and groaning, you know, the ball had gone back to Krul and people were getting frustrated and things like that. And Stuart had said to me, I'd had a chat with him before the AGM got underway that night, and he'd said to me, I'm going to say some stuff about Krul tonight. So, you know, keep your ears open for that, because I think you'll that might make you some headlines. And just sort of, you know, smiled. And then as he said it, the room just sort of took a bit of a gasp, couldn't believe he said it. But almost from that night, it felt like Tim knew he had everyone behind him, full backing, and then all the rest of the fans rode in behind Webber and Farker and stuff from that night onwards. And by the end of that season, he was playing brilliantly. Throughout last season, you know, there was no doubt he was going to be player of the season, was he? And to actually be back playing for Holland now, and in with a really good chance of actually playing at the European Championship, but still sticking with Norwich in the Championship, signing a new contract, you know, I think it's a bit of a dream for Norwich, really. And as long as he stays fit the rest of the season and recaptures that form, as Farker said a few times, Norwich have got the best goalkeeper in the Championship.
Yeah, they certainly do. And we'll hear from Daniel Farker on Tim Krul very shortly. I think I read this right in Dutch media, but of course the translation can sometimes be a bit wrong. But last time he got called up from Holland, and obviously was expected to play, wasn't he, the first time in, 5 years or so last year. There was a nice thing that said he's the first second-tier goalkeeper to play a game for, or maybe it was a competitive game for Holland since 1999, which is a staggering statistic. Just shows how well he's done and how highly he's regarded.
Yeah.
Obviously, Ronald Koeman, who was manager of the Netherlands, came and watched him last year against Liverpool, was it, in the league,
right,
when they came down to the training ground. So very, very highly thought of in that setup.
He was the first since Pierre van Hooijdonk was playing for Forest, wasn't he?
There you go. Yeah.
In what would have been Division 1 at the time.
Yeah, absolutely, which is some achievement, and as Daniel Farker said today, in contention for the Euros as well, I would think, and that is that's some achievement from where his career was a couple of years ago. Let's dive into some of the comments. We've got a few questions, so we'll run through a couple of those, and then we'll speak a little bit about Sebastian Soto. Craig Brown has simply said, "Good evening, guys." Good evening, Craig. Thank you very much for watching. Mark Hilton with a double header. He said, I've been to 2 FA Cup semi-finals. I'd love to see us get one further before I put my clogs. Well, let's hope they do, Mark. And he said, winning is a habit. Need to always approach this game as it is like a league game, even against the big guys. Given Chelsea are in a bad run, a great year to play them. So let's make sure we face them tomorrow. Absolutely, that would be a good tie at Carrow Road. Stephen Noakes, hello from Virginia. Question: how long before the new Greek defender might start training with the team? This is an interesting one, Dave. We are expecting his work permit application to be next week, aren't we? So possibly with a view to Middlesbrough.
Yeah, he had to isolate for a little while as well, didn't he? And return a couple of negative COVID tests because he'd obviously flown in from Greece last weekend and stuff. So this weekend was always looking highly unlikely. Even if they'd have got all that started, to be honest, with the way Farker operates, I don't think he'd have put him straight in anyway, even though he's been playing for his club over in Greece. So, yeah, maybe in contention for that Borough game, but even that, I wouldn't sort of bet my mortgage on it or anything, because Daniel does tend to take a bit of time with new signings, doesn't he, and want to ease them in. And he is in that fortunate position where Kintier should be back in full training as of the start of next week. Sorensen obviously played so well the other night and is clearly a very reliable cover at left back. Mumba, as you mentioned, is back and has played on the left as well as the right. So I've actually written my column on sort of the left back battle for tomorrow's Pinkin, and all of a sudden, after all the sort of gnashing of teeth about left backs in recent months, Daniel could potentially have the choice of 3 for next Saturday. So that's going to be an interesting one to see how that unfolds, because the way that Sorensen's playing, if he has another game at Barnsley, presuming he starts like he did on Wednesday night, then it's going to be particularly harsh to drop him, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, and it was some really interesting management techniques, wasn't it, after the game on Wednesday, where he described Jakob Sorensen's performance as being the best by a left back in the Championship, and it's all about raising this bar of competition and setting high standards. And yeah, Giannoulis, even though he comes in with loads of pedigree, it's really interesting, especially given he's a central midfielder by trade, that we're not necessarily talking about him coming in and taking that spot straight away. So kudos to Sorensen, really. And of course, he gets another opportunity there tomorrow. So if he can replicate that level of performance, then it really is going to be difficult for Daniel Farke to consider dropping him for next weekend.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was the headline I put on it for the website. I think I put Sorensen setting a high bar, something along those lines. Yeah, I mean, there is Mumba. I don't think Mumba will start just because of the nature of what he's had, COVID and having a few symptoms, and it tends to leave feeling a bit drained for a little while, doesn't it? He literally is only just back in training. So you wouldn't have thought that he starts ahead of Sorensen because Farke respects Barnsley, doesn't he? You look at their results. I know we just said that they lost the last three, but that is to Norwich, Swansea and Watford. So, and as you say, your man who was the Barnsley fan, they only lost 1-0 to Watford on Tuesday. So we can't get past the fact that they are going to be a real threat, Barnsley. And if Norwich don't turn up, then there's every chance they end up losing that one. But as we know, and as we've seen, and as we believed really from before a ball was kicked this season, if Norwich are on it and they play to their capabilities, they can beat anyone at this level.
Yeah, absolutely. Callum Howard on Facebook has asked an interesting question about Jakob Sorensen, so I'll throw this your way, Dave. Do you think Sorensen can replace McLean after his positive test result, or is he a different kind of player?
Yeah, for me, the Coventry game, we saw him and Tetty, didn't we? Central midfield, if I remember that correctly. And I didn't think it was great, to be honest. I think he is the defensive midfielder. And the way that Norwich play, that you have the holder, don't you, who is less adventurous, and the other one is more of a roamer. And when Norwich attack, it almost becomes a 4-1-4-1, and in defence it's a 4-2-3-1. So alongside Tetty, I didn't think it really worked. And that I'm sure it would be fine for this game tomorrow if it was Sorensen and Skip, and that you've got a solid block in midfield there. At least it's going to protect midfield. But I don't really feel like Sorensen, he's not a Leitner. He's probably not even a Tribal in terms of passing. He's not a Rupp. He's not a McLean. I don't feel like he's a playmaker and a ball player. He wants to be the destructive influence, and you never know, could be the long-term successor to Tetty, and may even be reason for hope that if Skip isn't kept, if Spurs don't let him stay, if Norwich go up this summer, then he may well be the sort of ready-made defensive midfielder that they need. But yeah, we'll see. That's probably a little bit of a frustration for him that we haven't really been able to see what he's made of in midfield just yet, because that's where he's played the majority of his football. But it's a nice sign that Daniel has said in recent days about, now that they've got Giannoulis in, he doesn't really feel they need to go and get another centre-back, because he feels Sorensen can do that job there. And from what we saw of him when he's played in a three at the back during games, he definitely looks comfortable as a centre-back, doesn't he? So I almost had that sort of half a thought earlier in the day that he's almost becoming like a little bit of a Phil Neville for Norwich, and that he can sort of slot in anywhere, can't he? He's sort of Mr. Reliable, and he's great attitude, good athlete, reliable without being spectacular. But he's clearly someone that has earned Farke's trust and the supporters' trust, and I think has hopefully got quite a bright future, even if Norwich get promoted, but potentially. But until we see him with an extended run in the team midfield, I think it's a little bit difficult to judge him properly.
Yeah, he's almost been a victim of his own success there, hasn't he?
Yeah.
He's been so good that he's sort of kept him there, even though perhaps he's had to without Xavi Quintilla. We'll get into a few more comments, and then we'll go to Daniel Farke on Tim Krul. Canary Mary Watson has said, "Evening, guys. I think the boss will start, as he says, his strongest team. I think either with usual fit players who play, then depending on how it goes, slowly replace them with some fresh legs to get into their rhythm. Without doubt, we will need everyone to finish this season." Yeah, it's kind of what we've been talking about in terms of Hernandez and Dowell. I think Mary could be right there. Harry has said, "Hi Connor, my brother Dave." So he's watching, which is good. Good evening, Harry. And Rhino Phil has said good evening as well. Evening, Phil. And then we've got one more question from Simon, then we'll go to Tim Krul, and then we'll answer some of the others after that. Simon Meadows has said, with Christoph Zimmermann out now, do you think Andrew Omobamidele gets his first start tomorrow? What do you think on that, Dave?
I don't think so. No, I mean he's literally only played a few minutes in the league, hasn't he? Got a very brief debut. I'd be surprised unless there was any worry over Hanley or Gibson. I think Gibson, he had that little break out of the team and is in his rhythm now, so he certainly won't want to be broken. So unless there's any concern over Hanley, then and like I said earlier, with there being a week break after this game, I can't see them moving away from that pairing. Which is probably the first choice pairing anyway at the moment. Hanley is the skipper, isn't he? And to be perfectly honest, I think Farke may possibly look to play Sorensen or Teti there ahead of him, because I think, as much as he's been involved, I don't think the plan was for Omobamidele to be involved in the first team this year. He is still 18. He's still very young. So I think the point that he is in and around the first team is just good for his development at the moment. And as he's spoken about, probably a loan is going to be needed to really kick his career into gear.
Yeah, absolutely. And even in the last FA Cup tie, he could have put him on the bench, couldn't he? And he decided against that, which maybe was a wise choice, given Christoph Zimmermann limped off at half time. But that Hanley and Gibson partnership is bubbling along nicely. And of course, behind them, Mr. Tim Krul set for his 100th appearance for Norwich City tomorrow. He's now just 85 behind what he managed in a Newcastle shirt, which would be some achievement if he could top that at Norwich City. Here is Daniel Farke praising his number one at his press conference this afternoon.
Yes, Tim is fantastic. I think, he improved more or less from day to day. Also in this game. Yeah, of course, in the beginning, after he was out so long, he was also a bit criticized in his first games, because perhaps he looked a bit rusty, and then you could see him growing anyhow from day to day. And I think the road he has gone anyhow was fantastic. He was there with his personality and his character from the first day when he worked, and unbelievably important for our group. And also what he did, and he always really hard work and being focused and concentrated. Work, you can always count on him. How he has developed his game is outstanding, and there is no doubt that he's the best goalkeeper in this league. There is no doubt that he was praised also like one of the best goalkeepers in the Premier League, and this is the best league in the world. And there's also no coincidence that he's right now fighting for the number one for the Netherlands, a really proper football nation, and that says everything about him. I think he has good chances also to play the Euros. I would totally back him, because he's made anyhow for the big stage and for the spotlight. Tim is a guy who can handle the pressure, and together with some other leaders in our dressing room, also so important to get the balance right, because we're always playing and training with many young lads who need to develop, and Tim's leadership and his appearance, his body language, his appearance on the pitch, his appearance in the dressing room is so important for us, and I'm unbelievably glad that we have him. Also great, and credit to him that he was willing to sign a new contract. Also great work of Stuart Webber that we were able to find a solution with him. I think for both parties a perfect sign, and it's just the first 100 games. So I think many more will follow, and we're all happy that we have to.
There we go, Daniel Farke praising Tim Krul and his influence on the side, and it was very, very good to see him back on Wednesday after his positive COVID test. Although I was slightly fearful that maybe he'd catch hypothermia or something, because Bristol City didn't work him at all in that goal. I don't think they had a shot on target, so that just sums it up. So that was Daniel Farke on Tim Krul. Someone I want to speak about now, Dave, is Sebastian Soto. Obviously, the news yesterday that broke at about 4:00, wasn't it, that Norwich City have recalled him from Telstar. We were expecting this to be the case, providing they could get a work permit. It sounds like he's got a GBE, but not a work permit, which Daniel Farke kind of spoke about today. But he was very keen to temper sort of expectations for him today, wasn't he?
Yeah, I'm sure the work permit will be confirmed in due course, because they wouldn't have been recalling him if they weren't confident that they were going to get it over the line, were they? And as soon as they got the the USA caps at the back end of last year. They were pretty confident they were going to be able to. So I think the context that Norwich fans need to realise almost is that they literally haven't been able to get him into training and stuff yet, because he signed from Hanover last year, and because he hasn't had that work permit, Farke's never even really been able to have a proper look at him, has he? So they want to gauge exactly where he's at, and they want to get him into training with the first team and assessing him. And that may well then mean that he stays as sort of the fourth choice striker and the lead under 23 striker for the rest of the season, and gets stuck into training and goes from there. And Tyrese Omotoye goes out on loan, or vice versa. They might be able to get a good loan lined up for Soto, say top end of League One or something like that. And Omotoye continues doing what he's doing at the moment, who is still a young lad, isn't he? He's, like I just said with Bamadili a little while ago, he's still only 18 years old. And the plan wasn't really for him to be near the first team this year, was it? Because he's still so young. And, he's not really had many opportunities to do anything, has he? It's just been little cameos off the bench here and there. So it's all great experience for him at the moment. But Soto, as a Norwich fan, you can't not be intrigued by it, can you? This lad who at the Under-20 World Cup scores 4 goals. It's only Erling Braut Haaland who outscored him, and now he's worth, 500 million or something ridiculous. He's probably the most sought-after player in world football, isn't he? And that was at the same tournament. Then he, winning 2 USA senior caps, despite the fact he's playing in the Dutch second tier. He scores 7 goals in 12 games over there. So he is an interesting one for the future, but he's still a 20-year-old. And Daniel did very much stress, that he's not coming back. He's not going to be, in competition for the first team straight away, unless he really impresses, of course, because we can't forget that Adam Eder is on the verge of being back in the mix, isn't he? He should be back in full training next week. And, how good was Adam looking in maybe in fits and starts before his stupid red card against Wickham? Yeah. And then, of course, the unfortunate the injury, which kept him out for a couple of months. He was starting for Ireland and things, wasn't he? So at that point, when he was injured, most of us were saying that he was ahead of Hugill in the pecking order. So now he's got some proper competition from Hugill now that he's in his rhythm as well. So interesting element with Soto, but we've got to remember that he's one for the future as things stand.
Absolutely, and that work permit hasn't been sorted yet for sure, as Daniel confirmed. A question on YouTube from Rand Sky, which I hope is his real name. I think he might know something we don't, which is he said, does Pukki's injury mean that Omotoye's loan to Swindon will be put on hold? What do you think of that in terms of the Omotoye's loan? League One would certainly be a great level for him to go to.
Well, I hadn't heard that link, so if that's true, then we'll have to do a little bit of digging. But I've certainly not heard any mention like that. But we have, had it suggested to us that Soto's return could well mean Omotoye going out on loan. And if so, that would be League One Swindon, wouldn't it? I think they got promoted last year, didn't they? So that would seem a very decent move if that kind of a level materialised. That's where Jayasimi was on loan from Norwich last season, wasn't it? It's where Lee Power is the chairman, isn't it? The former Norwich striker. So there is some sort of Norwich links there. But yeah, I haven't actually heard anything concrete in terms of that. So if he's given us a little nod on something there, then we'll have to put our ear to the ground.
Yeah, absolutely. I think judging from Farke's comment today, they might leave that one late in the window, maybe just to see who's further along and who does need that loan to League One, for example. But Swindon would be a very good move for Omotoye at 18. Matt Gregory has said, just seen if we don't count teams in Hertfordshire, Norwich are unbeaten in 22 games. There you go. That's a nice little statistic there from Matt. And then David Bale is jokingly said at your Phil Neville Jakob Sorensen comparison, that must be the worst thing you can say about another human being. That's very, very harsh on Phil Neville, who's just been appointed manager of Inter Miami, hasn't he, which is David Beckham's club.
Come on. I mean, Phil Neville had a top level career. He got 40 odd caps for England. I know he's not Mr. Popular, is he? But and also I'm afraid I might have to shoot Matt's comment down because Luton is in Bedfordshire, isn't it?
There you go then. Yeah,
Good point.
Certainly is. You're right. Yeah. Joachim on YouTube has said, I read on the Pinkham. Well, thank you for reading that Philip Heiser scored for his loan club the other day. I forgot that he was a Norwich player. Yeah, I think that was the general reaction to your piece that went up yesterday, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's why we did it. I mean, it doesn't feel like he's ever really been a Norwich player, does it? It's just one that hasn't worked out, and he may well end up spending his final season of his contract out on loan as well. But ultimately it was him. He scored the opener and then he set up the winner for Karlsruhe against Holstein Kiel, who are one of the promotion hopefuls in Bundesliga too. So, that's the equivalent of the Championship, and he's doing the business. But he had a pretty unhappy 2020, didn't he? His loan with Nuremberg didn't go particularly well, and it didn't seem to be going that well at Karlsruhe. He got a red card just before Christmas, so missed their first game of this year. But he's finally got himself into a little bit of a rhythm. But Philipp Heiser, short of hitting a real patch of form and Norwich not going up this season, it's very unlikely we'll ever see him again in a Norwich shirt, I'd have thought.
Yeah, not made a single league appearance, has he? I think his only appearance came in the League Cup against Crawley, didn't it? And obviously some friendly games, but beyond that, no, it just hasn't worked, that one. Mark Hilton, let's face it, Hanley and Gibson have already had a week off. Bristol City was so negative, they had nothing to do. They'll both start tomorrow to get going again.
Well, I don't think I agree with that, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I felt they had a tough night, actually, against Diédhiou in particular, certainly physically, but in terms of in possession, Gibson in particular was very good.
Yeah, I think that's doing Norwich a disservice. I felt that was quite probably Norwich's best performance of the season. They were good at home to Cardiff and Swansea, but I felt like that was the most controlled performance because Bristol are no mugs. They're a decent team, and early doors, they looked like they turned up. And if you remember the away game, they were far too passive with Norwich, weren't they? They gave Norwich all the space, and they didn't do that the other night. But I just felt Norwich were absolutely on it. And I know we've all sort of jokingly, and even Daniel has jokingly sort of said Krul had nothing to do with no shots on target. But certainly in the second half, he had to come and claim plenty of balls, a few punches clear. And the thing with Norwich's goalkeeper, whether it's Barden, Krul or McGovern, they are busy, aren't they? They get a lot of touches of the ball. They're passing the ball about at the back with Hanley and Gibson and Skip dropping deep and things like that. So I think that would do a disservice to how good Norwich were the other night, to be perfectly honest, because I think Bristol City are a decent team, although for the fourth or fifth season in succession or something, it looks like they've probably not quite got enough to reach the playoffs, which surprises me because I think for a couple of years I tipped them for the playoffs, because when you go to Ashton Gate, they've got a billionaire owner, haven't they, who owns the rugby club as well, and they that stadium is ready for the Premier League, and Bristol is a huge city, so I'm sure they will get it right at some point.
Yeah, it feels a travesty, doesn't it, that a city like Bristol don't have a Premier League team. But I think injuries have really frustrated them this year. But yeah, I'm with you. I thought Norwich contained them well, actually. After they came out of the traps pretty well, didn't they? Casey Palmer looked like he was going to be quite influential, and then they managed to kind of stifle that pretty quickly. So you have to give credit for Norwich that, and I think, as has been the case this season, they just looked a little bit of a level above them. So it's going to be interesting to see if that's the case tomorrow. A few more comments coming in. Matt said, remember Alfie Inge Haaland on Champ Manager 97-98 being a defensive midfielder, left, right, centre-back. Jakob Sorensen is that man at the minute. Yeah, certainly feels like that's the case. He can do a little bit of everything. Edward Ivans said, I think Tim Krul is a great player. We're lucky to have him. He reminds me of John Ruddy at his best. That's an interesting comparison. What do you think of that, Dave?
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I mean, John Ruddy was obviously very good for a good couple of seasons, wasn't he? I think Krul's better. I think he's a more complete goalkeeper. Certainly a lot better with his feet than Ruddy was, and more agile. I think, like I said earlier in the video, Krul was, in the early stage of his career, was a top Premier League goalkeeper and was expected to be a top goalkeeper throughout his career. So, I don't want to disrespect John Ruddy because he was a very good goalkeeper for Norwich and got on the England squad and before things started to sort of tail off for him. But I think Tim Krul's a better goalkeeper personally. Yeah,
I would agree with that. I think in terms of ability, absolutely. I think if he gets another promotion with Norwich, then that's going to push him right up there. And I remember we did a piece, I can't remember when it was now, on Norwich City's sort of goalkeeping history, and certainly some people regard Tim Krul as being right at the top of goalkeepers that have played for Norwich. And if he continues with this quality and in this form for a little bit of a longer period, then he's certainly going to help his cause, absolutely. And as Canary Mary Watson says, I'm thinking perhaps another penalty game for him tomorrow. Well, let's hope it doesn't go to penalties, but she does say that would be a great way to celebrate his 100th game. It would. I'm sure he'd like a nice quiet afternoon with a 2-0 win, though. I think if you offered him that, he would take that. And then Matt Gregory has come back and said, sorry, my bad. That's why I got a D in geography GCSE.
Well, don't worry. I failed my geography AS level because I hated my teacher and stopped going to the lessons. So we can agree on that one. Yeah, I mean, with Krul, the penalty thing, I think really sums him up well, because it shows that big personality that he has. And, saving a penalty is like scoring a goal for a goalkeeper, isn't it? And like, if you go back to the Man United game, which last season, when he scored saved the 2 penalties and kept it down to 3-1 when it should have been a lot higher score, and the way he celebrated them and he whipped up the crowd for those, that is Tim Krul for you, isn't it? He loves being the centre of things. He loves the attention and really contributing to things. And, I think Norwich are quite fortunate in that is his character, that he's sort of a family man. He's a good guy. He wants to be settled. And I think the fact that he's got, a young daughter and that his family are happy in Norwich, because he was previously very happy in Newcastle. And I think he was probably quite sad that things broke down for him in the way that they did with his injury, because I'm pretty sure his wife is from Newcastle and stuff like that. So he has really found a second home in Norwich, hasn't he? And if it wasn't for that element of things, I think they would have struggled to hold on to him, let alone get him to sign a new contract, because as I said, after relegation last year, he is a Premier League goalkeeper again now. And there are plenty of Premier League clubs who could have quite happily had him as their, at very least, in their squad, but as their number 1 this season. So, the longer Tim Krul is Norwich City's number 1, the better. Yeah,
I think it was Rob Elliott that described him as a Dutch Geordie, which is quite a nice expression, isn't it? But that certainly sums him up quite nicely. Right, we're going to sort of wrap things up in about 5 minutes or so. So any last questions, do get them in. Dave, you're going to be travelling to Oakwell tomorrow. What are you expecting from that game? 2 teams that, by the sounds of it and by the way the 2 coaches have been speaking, are going to go quite strong. So maybe a very similar game to what we saw at Carrow Road a couple of weeks ago. Barnsley with lots of energy and Norwich with maybe a little bit more quality. Is that kind of what you're expecting tomorrow in terms of themes and in terms of maybe how the game will pan out?
Possibly. I think what you see with the FA Cup games, certainly when my mind goes back to the Preston game last year. I remember I was all sat at Deepdale and it was the first game in ages that there hadn't been VAR, was there? And
it was lovely, wasn't it?
Yeah, Ida scored and we were like, is that it? Is it a goal? Brilliant. And I do feel like FA Cup games aren't played at quite the same intensity, certainly in sort of 3rd, 4th and 5th round. Once you get to the quarterfinals, and obviously it becomes quite a big deal, but I don't think it'll be quite the same intensity. I think it might be a little bit more open, probably a better chance of a few more goals. But the big thing for Norwich at the moment is that their confidence is just so high that you can see it, particularly in Buendia and Cantwell, the way they are playing at the moment, that that was probably the big difference between Bristol City. They were okay in the first half. They did some good things, but they couldn't execute. And Norwich were executing. They were turning chances into genuine goal scoring attempts. And you think about you watch the highlights of the other night, and as a Norwich fan, you can't not enjoy it, because it's basically just 5-6 minutes of good Norwich City chances. McLean having one good shot saved, Buendia only just firing past the post, Cantwell, Vrancic, they all had big chances in the game, didn't they? And I would hope travelling up there that Norwich's confidence is going to be so high, and that Barnsley have probably just been knocked off kilter a little bit too much by a difficult run, that they should come out on top of it, as long as they take it seriously, which by everything that we've seen in the build-up so far, they are going to take this seriously, and they do want to win the game. So we're travelling up for it. Should probably just explain a little bit, and we talked about it in our pod and stuff last week, that we didn't go to the Cardiff game just because it's such a long journey, and obviously with that you've got to stop at service stations, you've got to fill up with petrol, you've got to have a hotel stay and stuff like that, because otherwise it's like an 18-hour day for us, 16, 17, 18-hour day, depending on sort of how it goes. It has taken us 7 hours to get to Cardiff for a game before because of traffic problems on the road and stuff. So it's probably going to be the same with Swansea, which is, as we've seen this afternoon, is moved to a Friday night 8:15 kickoff. because personally, our management basically left it to us and said, whatever you feel comfortable with during lockdown and during this stage of the pandemic, we'll back you with. If you want to cover games via the stream, then that's fine. None of us want to cover a game by stream. We all want to be at every Norwich City game, home and away. But just on balance for us, we feel like the Cardiff and Swansea game didn't quite sit comfortably with us. Whereas Barnsley and Millwall, these two away games we've got coming up, you can take food in the car with you. You can fill up with petrol before you leave Norwich. You don't have to get in and out of the car, other than maybe for a rest stop. Between Norwich and the stadium, and the stadiums aren't the problem for me. I've always felt safe in stadiums ever since football got back underway in June. We're still all wearing our masks, and press boxes are socially distanced, and things like that, and interviews are socially distanced. So yeah, we are going to go to Barnsley and Millwall, but probably which is a shame as well because it's such a big game, the Swansea game, but we'll probably cover that one from home as well. But hopefully, society is going to start moving back towards a bit of normality, hopefully by the end of next month at least, and then football will follow a little bit, and we can start thinking about covering games fully, because it seems like a long time since me, you, Paddy and Tony all went to a game. It would have been the
Sheffield United, wouldn't it? Sheffield United was
Sheffield United, sorry, yeah. So yeah, if you think about those two games, 9,000 Norwich fans at Tottenham in midweek, and then we went to Sheffield United on the Saturday, and that was when the Premier League had first told the players to stop shaking hands and things. So yeah, we're getting towards a year since fans and since the four of us have all been able to go to games together and stuff. So strange times, but hopefully we can see that light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah, fingers crossed. And of course, all our coverage remains intact, which is the main thing. I think we've been able to ensure that even when we weren't at Cardiff, for example. So hopefully you won't really see any noticeable drop off. Just a few final questions, and then we'll get to our away days video. Phil has said, "Is there much to link with the Luton midfielder?" Dave, you wrote this story, didn't you? It's Perry and Panzu. Just talk us through a little bit about that one and why it's an interesting link.
Yes, Pelly Ruddock and Panzu is his name. Well, I mean, it's come from a website called Football Insider, which is very hit and miss. Sometimes they're absolutely on the money and they've got something from an agent. Sometimes they've just been fed a load of rubbish and they still go with it. So I wouldn't be reading loads into it, but we felt it was a rumour, but it's still very much a rumour. As we always do, we badge these things clearly as it's a transfer rumour. This isn't us reporting that something, we're not saying he's going to be unveiled at Norwich next week or anything, are we? This is very much still at the rumour stage. And essentially, he's out of contract in the summer, so he's free to talk to clubs. No doubt his agent is involved at some point here, but West Brom and Swansea also linked. He's made nearly 300 appearances for Luton. He's a defensive midfielder. He's 26. He's established in the Championship. He's a popular guy at Luton. He won their Supporters Trust's Player of the Season last year. Nathan Jones has raved about him at times. So the reason I put all this into context in our story, of course, is that Norwich defensive midfield is probably an issue that they're looking at. Alex Hetty may well be bringing an end to his 9 years with the club in the summer. Ollie Skipp is no guarantee to be back here next year. Certainly not if Norwich aren't in the Premier League. As we spoke about earlier, we're not 100% sure if Jacob Sorensen is capable of being a Premier League potential defensive midfielder yet, are we? So it's not one that that we're reporting as being anywhere near close or anything like that, but he would look to fit the sort of player that they will certainly have a list on a list somewhere. The only suspicion for me would maybe be he would be one who was on their Championship list rather than a Premier League list, because that's what they need. They're not guaranteed promotion, are they? Which is why the deal with Yanulis and Gibson and Kintia are so good, because they got them on loan with a view to them becoming permanent deals if they get promoted. So this story is saying that it's Luton potentially cashing in January rather than losing him on a free, and you can't see Norwich bringing this lad in this month. But you never know; he could be somebody that would be a good squad asset for a promoted club. So an interesting one, I think, at the very least.
Yeah, one to keep an eye on, especially with the new Brexit rules and regulations, which, of course, as we've spoken about, open up some markets, limit others. So there is certainly going to be a higher tab on English talent. So that's worth keeping an eye on. Mark Simons has said, "Sorry, I missed the start. Did you mention whether Pukki has recovered from his side strain? I don't imagine he'll play tomorrow." No, he's out for tomorrow. Daniel didn't mention, unless you heard it, Dave, that he'd be back for Middlesbrough. Did he say that today?
I think he said it along the same lines as Cantwell, didn't he? That he's pretty hopeful that he's back. I mean, that was the original timeline, wasn't it? That, or was that getting my press conferences maybe in a muddle? I think it was after the Bristol City game. He said that he thought Pookie would be back for the Middlesbrough game, wasn't it? So it was always a minor thing, and probably Hugo would have started tomorrow anyway, wouldn't he? So I think, as far as we know, I mean, you look at the list. I mean, it's 10 players out for tomorrow's game, and quite a few of them could be back in contention ahead of the Middlesbrough game. So as long as things don't take a downturn, Daniel's got quite a few decisions to make.
Yeah, he absolutely has. Yeah, you're quite right. I remember Daniel saying that now about the Middlesbrough game. And then Mark Hilton's gone with a 2-1 Norwich win. We'll let one in with about 10 minutes to go just to keep it interesting after in the first 80 minutes. Well, let's hope so. Dave, I thought we'd end on some Barnsley memories, because I know we've both got one which is quite interesting. I'll let you go first and talk about your experience in the way, and with just over 4,000 Norwich fans at Oakwell that day.
Yeah, in 2002. Yeah, me and my best mate went up on the club coaches, and it was a great day. It's still probably one of my favourite away days as a Norwich fan. When I was only 15 at the time, and the atmosphere was so great because Norwich sort of come up on the rails and surged into sixth place in the end, didn't they? Quite dramatically on that final day, and that's when we both had a season ticket in the Barnsley and things like that, and. Yeah, the anticipation and the excitement around it was brilliant, because it was the last away day of the scheduled season. So, as you can probably just about see in there, that it's fancy dress and inflatables and the yellow and green wigs and all those sort of things. And the team was in a good run of form and stuff. And what made it sort of stranger was that the Barnsley fans invaded the pitch at full time, because I think they had basically been relegated. I don't know. I don't think it had been mathematically sealed. I can't remember exactly. But while the Norwich fans are just partying and enjoying it, and it was certainly a memorable one, and just that period there when beating Wolves in the playoffs and even the playoff final. As much as it was a horrible end with the penalty shootout and Daryl Such missing that penalty and things like that, I still remember it pretty fondly, because the occasion, I'd never been to a big stadium like that with Norwich, and the roof closed and it was boiling hot, and my dad and his mates sort of sneaking us a sneaky pint at the pub that they were at. Obviously we weren't old enough to be drinking at that stage, so we were told to get in the corner and keep your heads down. But on a special occasion like that, you got to be snuck a pint, haven't you? And even though it ended badly at Cardiff and stuff, that just that month or 6 weeks or whatever felt pretty special.
Yeah, absolutely. I've also got a memory of Barnsley, which is 2011. Andrew Croft scored his goal that was very similar to Justin Fashanu, where he sort of took it, turned and volleyed in the bottom corner, which was excellent. I was actually mascot that day, which was very interesting. I can tell you some.
It's a great photo.
It is, isn't it? I tell you what I like about that photo is it makes me, 11-year-old me, look absolutely hard as nails when you think Grant Holt's got some thermals on and I'm short sleeved in the middle of February in Barnsley. So I'm quite happy with that one. But no, that was a good day. I scored a penalty in front of the away fans, which is absolutely the most nervous I've been in my life. I put it in the top right, I think, against Toby Tyke, who was the mascot of it. So difficult goalkeeping opposition I had, and then the away fans started singing Lambert, sign him up. But the call never came, unfortunately. But that was a very good day. And as my friend Ben has just commented, I don't like to mention that very often. So there we go.
I never did anything like that, sort of mascot or ball boy or anything like that. I don't know. I don't think it ever really sort of occurred to me to do it. But that's a lovely photo there. So, that's one for the wall, isn't it? One to show the grandkids.
Yeah, it is absolutely. I think it was a birthday present. I remember walking home from school and my mum telling me, and it was like, oh wow, okay. But that was when things were pretty good, and I remember waiting in the tunnel watching the Norwich players arrive, and Paul Lambert went in the dressing room for a second and then disappeared, and you didn't see him again until he came out just before kickoff. It was all sort of Ian Colehouse and Gary Carter leading that, but that was very interesting. So let's hope that Norwich City can continue their good form against Barnsley. I think as a general rule of thumb, they have a pretty good one. I think I read that they haven't lost in 16 meetings against them, but I may have the Barnsley have won just once of the last 16 meetings. There you go. I knew I read 16 somewhere. So hopefully Norwich can keep that up, progress to the fifth round of the FA Cup rather, and we can be talking about a home tie against Chelsea or Luton. Dave, thank you very much for joining me. Thank you all very much for watching. We'll leave you with our away days video.